Okay, now this is the book that I use when I do the edge-to-edge quilting classes and all. This is Amelia Scott's. It's her first book. Now the older books, mine came with the CD in there, but now everybody's doing the download. So if you purchase the book now, it'll have a code where you go to her website and you download all the designs. But you'll get all of these 10 designs with the book, and in the different sizes. There's a small, medium, and large size depending on your hoop size for your machine. Now I'm gonna do the little baby bottle, and now I like to go ahead and use the biggest hoop that I have. Okay, in the book she has you stitch off little templates for the designs, and you draw around the inside of your hoop, and then you cut these templates out. Now, kind of prep work to get your quilt started, and I'm just doing a little sample here. So this would be your quilt top. You cut your backing and your batting quite a bit larger than your top. And so I have a good, 5 or 6 inches all the way around the quilt top, so that when you go to re-hoop, you may have to hoop some down here at the bottom. Okay? And so make sure you have plenty of space or plenty of extra backing and batting all the way around. And then in the book, she explains how to measure your quilt and decide how many rows you're going to have, and if you're going to have an odd number or an even number. I don't go through all that. I just start in the center of my quilt every time. And so I've drawn a line down the center with a fabric marker right down the center of my quilt. Now also prep work, I would just take tape and tape along the edges of my quilt top so that my foot wouldn't catch on here. But what I've started doing now is I do a big zigzag stitch all the way around, and then I don't have to worry about the tape. I just put the walking foot on my machine and zigzag those raw edges, and then that will hold those down, and that will be enclosed in your binding. So that just helps so that your foot doesn't catch and you don't have to pick tape out of your stitches. So we're ready to hoop. Okay, when we start hooping, now you can use the magnetic hoops for quilting, and some people find that easier. I like going ahead and using the regular hoops because I do have that plastic template with them. So you kind of figure out what works best for you. But now, take the template out and then take that to your machine. Now, at your machine, and I've brought up the design. Now, I'm going to trial function, and then I'm going to move that needle point to the very top. So now I know that my needle is at the very top of the design in the center. Then on this machine, I can go into move. I can turn on the little laser light, and so I can see where that laser light is. And I can move that over, and I'm going to move my design up just a little bit. So it's going to be stitching off some here, and then it's going to come down onto my quilt. So now I'm ready to stitch. This is the very first design. So we're just going to stitch this design, and then we'll come back when it's done. So it's done stitching the very first design. So what I'm going to do now, I'm not going to unhoop my quilt yet. I'm going to take the hoop off. I'm going to move it over here. And what I want to do is mark on my plastic template where the starting point, kind of zoom in on that. So this is where the design started, and then over here is where the design stopped. And I want to put that mark on my template. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of making that a little bit darker so y'all can see it in the camera, and I can see it. And this is just a fabric marker. And then I'm going to take my plastic template, lay it down in the hoop. We have a helper over here in the floor. Okay, and then what I do is I take a piece of tape, like the Kimberbell tape, and I tape that on my template on either side. And then I'm going to take a pen, which I don't have handy right now. Here's a Sharpie. And I'm going to draw an arrow where that point is. And that's going to help me hoop it for the next row that I'm doing. I'm not going to do the next row yet, but now my template is ready to help me with that. So now I'm going to unhoop it. Now, what you want to do when you're going to do the next pattern, you don't want the pattern like butted right up next to it. You do want a little gap, but you don't want to come down too far. So I'm going to mark this, I'm going to turn this upside down. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to find the very bottom of this quilt design. And I'm going to measure, I'm going to line up this line with one of the lines on my ruler, so I'm marking it straight. And I'm going to come about 1/4 of an inch away from the very bottom of that design. And then I'm going to mark that, draw that. So now I have the placement of where I want my next design, the top of my next design to go. Now I still have my needle in this trial button. I still have my needle at the very top needle point here in the center. So what I need to do now is go into move, and again I'm going to turn on that laser light and just move it down not that much, so that my needle is on that center line up there at the top. So I know that's where the top of my design is going to be, and that's where it's going to stitch off, and it's still in the center. So now I'm going to stitch the second design, and this is still the A pattern. So now I've got the second design stitched off, and then you would just do the same thing. You would just repeat that over and over again. So you would measure down about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom of that design, draw you a line, rehoop it, and stitch off the next one. And so you just keep going. But now we're ready to do the next row. So this is row A, okay, the first row. You want to start moving to the right of your quilt, so that way the bulk of your quilt is going to start moving away from your machine to the left. So we're going to come over here and start this row. So before I start hooping for the next row, and this is just something I do, it's not in the book, I do this. I like to draw me a line, another center line down my quilt. So what I do is I measure how wide this design is. So this design from the starting to the ending point is about 6 inches, right? So I need to measure from this center line that I drew, the first one, 6 inches over. So all the way down my quilt. So now I'm ready to hoop the next one. So I'm going to take, and then I'm going to use that grid, and this is where I'm going to use those arrows that I marked. So I want that arrow, so where this next design is going to start, I want it to match where that previous design stopped. And so these designs going across are going to be connected with each other, so it looks like edge-to-edge quilting. And so I'm going to line that up, and then that's where I use the line that I just drew. Should be close to the center of my hoop. Okay, so now I've got that lined up and the center line lined up. So now I'm going to take hoop, put the hoop on the machine. Now, this is where I need to show you something. Hang on. Okay, this is just a little sample that I did. This is why we have an A and a B. So A was our first row, and the little duckies are going right side up. When we do the next row over here to the right, we're going to do the B file, and it's going to be upside down. So just so that way when you're looking at it, your bottles aren't all lined up in a straight line and your ducks aren't lined up in a straight line. It looks more like a meandering pattern. So on the USB stick, I'm going to go get the B design. Okay, so I went and got the B design. Just make sure you get the same size pattern. So I'm doing the medium, so I went into the medium folder, got the B design. Now, I'm not going to worry about the center of this design. I want to worry about that starting point right there. So what you can usually do is go into your little trial button again, and this time choose the dot, center left dot, and then I'm going to turn on that laser light so that it is on that point. I like to overlap it just a hair, so see how my needle is going to come down and it's going to be overlapped just a little bit, okay? But it's lined up with that line. And again, that's why you use kind of a bigger hoop so that you have a little bit of wiggle room. And then we just start stitching. And it will be lined up with that point. And part of this design, because this is my last one basically on this row, it may stitch off a little bit over here on this side of the batting. And that's okay. Okay, and see how I got that next one stitched off and how it met exactly, so it just looks like they're flowing into each other. And then you would just do the exact same thing. You'd hoop up your next one, you would match that next design with the ending point of this one, and then stitch it off. So all of this row would be the B design. And then if I had more quilt over here, you would keep going. You would mark the center again all the way down, and you'd bring up the A row again. So you're going to alternate A, B, as you work across. And you're going to do the whole right side of your quilt. Once you're done with the right side of your quilt, what you're going to do is you're going to turn your quilt upside down, and then we'll start working with this side, which would be originally the left side of your quilt, but that way the bulk of your quilt is going to be to your left again. I'm back to the little sample here. So this was row A, and then when we did the row to the right, it was B, but then see how we flipped this one, we flip it upside down when we start going to this side of the quilt, and we're going to bring up the A design again. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I've got it hooped up. That line is kind of overlapping that little dot just a little bit, and that's okay. And I'm straight. Then when you put that on the machine, make sure one thing too is when you are putting this quilt off and on your machine, make sure that none of your quilt gets tucked up underneath the hoop, because then you'll be stitching through all your layers and it's very frustrating. So I've brought the A design back up, because you can tell it's A because it's right side up. I'm going to go into my little trial, and I'm going to bring up that center point again, and then go into move, and move it. Oh, turn the laser light on. Move it into position. And I like it to overlap just a little bit, and then start sewing. Okay, and see, it finished stitching that design off, and it matched exactly. And then you would just continue on. You would keep doing the A design again, either up your quilt or down your quilt, however you started. And then when you did your next row, if you continued on over to this side, you would bring up, you would bring up B again, and you'd alternate A, B, and keep going down your quilt. And so that's how you do the edge-to-edge quilting.